Hello everybody, welcome back. It is Monday, October 16th, 2023, and you are listening to episode 173 of the Can I Say Something podcast. Your host, Anna Recluse, with your juicy caboose, Damian. Joining me today is...
Derick McDuff.
On today's show, spooky season is in full swing, so we'll be diving headlong into all the horror movies we've been checking out for Hooktober 10. Altered States, VHS 85, and Poltergeist, in addition to many, many more. After that, we'll be counting down our top 5 most influential horror movies right into the show. Can I Say Something podcast at gmail.com, Bicycle on Twitter, subscribe on Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Rate and review it on Apple Podcasts. Tell a friend, family member, or stranger. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Very, rested and relaxed and rearing to go.
Hey, nice, very cool. Halloween season is in full swing. The fall season is in full swing. I got my I sometimes will do the what is it called? Pumpkin spice lattes. I've been doing that for a while, but I think they're getting too sugary, so I'll just go with a apple cider. Apple cider drink. I got my apple cider candles cooking. Took out my AC for the year, so I am hunkering down for the cold season. Yep, it is upon us.
I'm more of a maple guy. Yeah, it's the cold season up here gets to the chilly, early 70s, low 70s, sometimes even high 60s. Gets crazy. It's nuts. You know?
Yeah. Right now we're sitting at a cool 45. It's kind of wild because going to school in the Northeast means like wearing a coat and extra pants in the morning. And then by the time afternoon rolls around, it's like 65, 70, and you're just sweating your ass off. So going anywhere for the day in New England in the fall means having to dress like a dude from like the 20s and just being ready for anything. You're just ready for any sort of weather to hit you during the day. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. I remember from when I was up there last year, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Yeah. It was nice, but also I was like, it is sunset, and there's what is going on?
Yeah, it's getting to the point where I'm waking up and it's dark out. I'm going to bed and it's dark out, and that doesn't feel good. It's people have seasonal depression up here for a reason. It's because you don't see the sun for 6 months, 7 months out of the year, so which is not great. So let's get into all the stuff going on this week. So MCU, they have a book out this week by Joanna Robinson. I'll be talking about that later. Not a great spot, still not in a great spot. And there's been, rumors circulating about why that is. And this week we got, a somewhat official report, a somewhat, lengthy and in-depth report about what is, I'm not going to say possibly going on, but I think we have a very good idea that, they've had this model for a while that they've been sort of working under, where they have Kevin Feige, the guy, the architect, the puppeteer of the whole thing, right? And he's sort of had time to oversee a lot of, if not all of, the productions that Marvel put out over from 2008 to 2018. After that, you had COVID, you had shutdowns, you have rearrangements of the overall narrative. But also you just had a much, much larger scale projects. You had many more projects going on all at the same time. You had TV shows in addition to the same sort of pace that they were putting out movies, pre-2020. And so it just seems like to me, and based on this article, that, they were trying to, adopt the same model of having Kevin Feige sort of look over all this stuff at the same time, but give him twice as much work, which has seemed to not work out in their favor. And also they talked about now in this article about how they don't have a traditional TV model where you don't have a showrunner. You have people that present like a show Bible. I forget what the woman's name was that did it for Loki. So you have somebody that sort of comes in and says, here's my overall vision for the show, but then that person then is slotted into the director role, and sort of just is sort of that person and doesn't really have a say in terms of how the rest of the project is going to go from there. You're just sort of like, hey, here's my thoughts, and then it's sort of put into a committee, and the committee sort of oversees the project. That's sort of what the idea I got from this article, right?
Yeah, because I did also read it was originally broken by the Hollywood Reporter.
Yeah.
And so I read that article. And yeah, it's something that was not necessarily surprising to me that Marvel Studios, which is a film studio, is making their TV shows like films, because they shut down their TV division and replaced it with their film division. And the film division started making TV shows. And yeah, it's not super surprising to me that that is the way they handled things. I don't know the intricacies of it, if that's exactly correct with the person who was the director who created the show Bible didn't have creative say, because it seemed to me from and I should look up her name, but the person who was kind of the, I would have been considered the showrunner in, typical circumstances for Loki, did have, based on their interviews, did have a lot of creative say. So I'm not sure really, what the exact breakdown was, but yeah, they are going to be changing things to be, rather than, I think, what it kind of mostly was saying is, rather than doing making a pilot and being like, all right, are we going to develop the show? They kind of just make the whole show all at once, rather than doing it, shooting an episode and having different, directors working on different projects and shooting different things, or not different projects, different parts of the project at different times. So the model is different than a lot of shows, and for a lot of people that wasn't working. And I think we were seeing some of that in Secret Invasion, where if something didn't work, if you had a pilot that didn't look like it worked, you just wouldn't make the thing. And in this, they were like, well, we've already made the whole thing, or in the case of Daredevil, we've made half the thing, and they decided to scrap it and just kind of start over with Daredevil Born Again. So yeah, it's something, we'll see how effective that's going to be. I don't know if that was, the root of some of the problems, but yeah, they'll be changing up the way they handle these shows, and probably going to be more like traditional network TV going forward.
Yeah, I do want to add on to that, but I just want to say, you had Michael Waldron served as head writer, and Kate Herron was, director. But she also was on a few different podcasts talking about how, she had the show Bible. She came up with the whole, I'm imagining she came up with the TVA idea and this whole, she came up with the overarching thing for it. And so, you have Michael Waldron as head writer and Kate Herron coming up with the plot of the whole thing. So one of them traditionally would be the showrunner. Traditionally, one of them would be sort of on set as saying, like, let's keep to, what we decided that the show is going to be, keeping everything on the rails, and not having that, I think, has led to a lot of what we're seeing right now, where just a lot of disconnection and a lot of miscommunication from, what the show was supposed to be. And also, they talked to, like, I've been reading a bunch of the MCU book and just hearing about things like, Edgar Wright coming in and not wanting to sort of be subservient to the sort of Kevin Feige of it all, and him coming in and saying, we like your style, we like your tone, and we want to keep that, but then we also need you to, connect this to other stuff. And so you have all of that overarching stuff that needs to be put in there, and I'm not really sure how that is missing by not having a showrunner. But anyways, what was I going to say? It's just a shame. And also, in the midst of the writer's strike and the actor strike, which I heard is not going well, the actor strike are still, they had direct meetings recently within the past few days, and those talks have broken down, so that's not good. But also, in the light of that, just hearing about the amount of money they've put into these shows, right, and them not. Them putting $200 million into a show, or how much money they put into Secret Invasion, and then however much money they put into Daredevil Born Again, and them saying, okay, we're going to scrap this. It just shows so much, it's so frustrating to see them throwing away money like this, and then them turning around and saying, well, we don't have money to pay the writers. It's just an absurd sort of, not greed, but just, just a level of thoughtlessness about how you're spending this millions and millions of dollars, throwing it away down the toilet, and also at the same time saying we can't afford to pay people a living wage. It's just so frustrating. And so, frustrating is the best word for that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that the writers at least do seem like they got a good deal. And I'd read some things like if Disney lost more on the writers lockout than they would have if they would have just agreed to their demands in the first place.
Yeah.
The other thing too I want to say is that really I think the difference is that uh, that TV is really more of a writer's medium, with the showrunners being writers and having much more of a say, whereas film is much more of a director's medium, where
Yep.
on set the director is really the driving creative voice much more than the writer. For better or worse, that's kind of the way that it's been run, since both of those, for the last however many decades. So I think that is kind of a critical distinction that Marvel was not really making when it came to the whole showrunner thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, they were just trying to apply this model that worked for them for, 10, 12 years, making movies the way they did, and then shifting to TV and be like, yeah, well, TV, movies, what's the difference? And it's actually a big difference. It actually is a huge difference.
Yeah.
There's just...
Which is why they feel like 6-hour movies a lot of the time.
Yes. Yes, I've watched a few things recently where I was like, this could be a movie. This could be a movie. We'll talk about those later, but yeah.
Which I don't always mind, sometimes like, okay, miniseries, like this just kind of feels like a miniseries. I think it worked. I think WandaVision worked because it was still very episodic.
Yeah.
Loki kind of, despite it being one season and then we're a couple episodes in, feels kind of more like a miniseries. So, sometimes it works better than other times.
Yes, exactly. So, yep, there's that. And then we got a couple deaths just happened recently. Today, Suzanne Summers passed away. I believe at 77, 76, around that. Yeah, I remember watching being home, TGIF, step by step, watching that every Friday. That was really my big time that I watched her. I know she was in Three's Company back in the 70s and 80s and stuff.
I used to watch that a lot on like Nick at Night and stuff like that. Long after ceased airing, but big fan of that show.
Yeah. And then also Piper Laurie, who was on the Twin Peaks that I just watched this year for the first time. She was very good in that. Very good as Carrie's mother in the movie Carrie.
Yeah.
So that's that's her claim to fame for me. And then there's another one I put on here because I was thinking about not putting it on here because we don't. I know you and I haven't really watched a lot of his movies, but Terrance Davies also passed away this week. At the age of 77, again, another 77, 76-year-old passed away this week. Let's see, Benediction, I think came out a couple years ago, which I heard was very good. One of these directors that seems to have a very specific voice and seems to have, trouble funding movies because of that. I heard the Deep Blue Sea is very, very good. The 2011 movie with Tom Hiddleston and Rachel Weisz. Tom Hiddleston, Rachel Weisz, Simon Russell Beale was in that, so I've heard very good things about that. And just one of those guys that I've always heard the name of, but never really had a chance to check out their stuff.
Yeah. There's a director that I also need to kind of visit more of his things for sure.
Yeah. Then so let's get to what we've been watching. Man, there's too much shit. I just mentioned it. There's too much shit. Like just this week we had Lessons in Chemistry come out, which I'm looking forward to. Those thankfully they put those out in the first 2 episodes just dropped, and then they're gonna do a weekly format after that. The Fall of the House of Usher dropped all 8 episodes. Which I don't know. I feel like they could not do that. They probably didn't need to do that because they're hour long each. And, I think it's just one of those things you can just let it go. Do 3 maybe, and then do 2, and then do two more. But, it sucks because it sucks for a very specific reason, because you put them all out there and then you have to be very, very careful if you're going to watch this thing to not be spoiled by people who watch the entire thing all at once, So there's so many reasons not to do it this way. I really would be curious as to why they do it like that,
Yeah, no, I mean, because that's what, an Apple Plus show, right?
Netflix.
Netflix?
The Lessons in Chemistry was Apple. Yeah, you're correct about that. The Fall of the House of Usher was Netflix.
Yeah, I know Netflix is usually pretty stringent about dropping all the episodes at once, or at least breaking the seasons up into chunks. And I know that's always been their business model. And I know, like, when, for example, Amy Sherwin Palladino was bringing the Gilmore Girls, not reboot, but the kind of continuation.
Yeah.
That was basically like a mini series. She wanted to release them week by week, and Netflix was like, "Nope, they're all dropping at once. That's the way we do things here."
Yeah. Yeah, I do not understand the logic at all. You're extending it because we're having this issue now, or Netflix is having the issue, and the streamers are having the issue where the strikes are affecting things. Where you are going to have this sort of gulf of content pretty soon. So it makes sense from that perspective to sort of expand these things out to a longer timeline. But yeah, it's just frustrating to pop on the thing and be like, oh shit, I gotta watch all this thing before somebody spoils it for me. But let's see. So let's get into some of the stuff we've been watching. I watched Dumb Money. Did I talk about this already? Because I feel like we've had discussion about this.
I feel like we've talked about it, but I don't know if it was just the trailer or the whole movie.
Because I remember saying something like, Dumb Money is the culmination of like 80s stuff of like. Oh
yeah, because you were talking about it like being the Social Network.
Yeah, did I? Because I'm looking at last week's notes and I'm like, or last time's notes, and I don't see it on here. That's
maybe
weird.
Not then.
Yeah. Okay. So I watched it anyway. It's very funny just to see like all of these, Academy Award winners, Academy Award nominated people saying things like, to the moon, diamond hands, baby, calling themselves the R word, and just like wild. It's wild to see these people in this. It's got obviously the movie directed by Craig Gillespie, stars Paul Dano, Pete Davidson, Vincent D'Onofrio is one of these guys that I'm just like, this is a capital A actor in this movie with these about this ridiculous story, the ridiculous people in this story. How much of the story were you following at the time of this?
I was pretty interested in it. Because I'm like, cool, eat the rich. Let's go.
Yeah, I got duped a little bit into like the Robin Hoodification of it all. Of like, Robin Hood, for those that don't know, is just an iPhone app or an Android app that's on your phone, and you don't need to do anything other than I want the stock, I'm buying the stock. It has like it's literally, hey, the stock is here. You want to? It's $10 per stock. How much stock do you want to buy? Hit buy, and that's it. There's no commission fees. There's no talking to a financial guy. There's nothing. It's just literally 2 buttons, buy or sell. Makes it incredibly simple to do that. And I had a little bit extra cash during this time, and so I burned through a bunch of it, buying up a bunch of stock. And then this was actually like it was into the pandemic. I started in like early 2020. And so when you buy stock, you're basically betting that it's going to go up, obviously. So all stocks shit the bed, lost a bunch of money when COVID happened. And then I was like, okay, so I'm just going to short sell. I'm going to, buy a bunch of puts or whatever they're called and just see if I can make money that way. Then the stocks went back up and I was like, fuck, can't win either way. So
You're like my brother with sports. Like he just bets on sports and all these futures and stuff.
Yeah. So if people don't know, what the entire idea was that the GameStop stock, which is incredibly hard to say, was like $3 at the beginning of the middle of 2020, end of 2020. And so their idea, this guy, Keith Gill, is a financial analyst out of Brockton, Massachusetts, which isn't near me. It's over near the west, down near Boston. And so his idea was like, let's just buy a bunch of the stock, because he's thinking his rationale at the beginning was just people still buy video games. He said something like, 65% of people still buy physical disc because a lot of people don't have access to broadband or reliable access to a good internet connection, so they're still buying these games at the stores and getting the disc. So just like he has this YouTube channel, he's like, hey guys, I just think it's a good idea, maybe we should try it. Enough people got into it and the stock started going up 20, 30, 40, 50, and it got the attention of short sellers, which what a short seller is basically just a fancy way of saying you're betting that the stock will go down and stay down. You lose money if it goes up, you make money if it goes down. And so that's Seth Rogen's character, who is, Seth Rogen played Gabe Plotkin, a capital management investor for Melvin Capital. She had short sale or short sighting, whatever it's called, on the stock. And so he was losing billions of dollars as the stock was going up. So him and a bunch of other wealth fund managers, infused cash into the thing. They stopped. This is the big thing where they basically cheated. They were like, okay, your guys are playing by our rules. Now we're going to change the rules, where they said, like, you're making too much money. We're going to put a stop on all sales of this one stock. Not every stock in Robinhood. We're just was one stock, because Robinhood didn't have the money to cover when people were going to sell the stock, because they made so much money off of it. People were making hundreds of millions or hundreds of thousands. One guy, the main guy, Keith Gill, was, up in the millions of dollars. So a lot of people were cashing out. Robinhood didn't have the cash on hand to pay out those sales of the stock. So then they said, all right, we're going to just put a freeze on all sales from Robinhood. So just a bunch of, very skeezy things went on. Of course, nobody went to jail. Another, Big Short version of that. So very, very entertaining. And also educational if you're not up on the events of all that.
Yeah, I've been meaning to check the movie out. I'm very interested in it. I'm always interested in stuff like that. I do really want to watch the movie. I don't know if you heard the documentary called Abacus, Small Enough to Jail?
Nope.
Okay, so it's the guy, Steve James, who directed Hoop Dreams and Life Itself, two really great documentaries. It's a documentary about the only banker that went to jail in the 2008 financial crisis because it was a small bank called Abacus. And that Small Enough to Jail, that's where the title comes from. So I need to check out that one too. I need to check out Dumb Money too, because it seems very interesting. I like a lot of those actors, and it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, really, really, really well made. Then do I want to go back and forth? But Telemarketers has parts has a crossover to Dumb Money, just because it's about scams. This is fascinating. This came out this year, aired from August 13th to August 27th, was made by a bunch of different people. A bunch of executive producers are on this. These hefty brothers, Danny McBride, Jody Hill, a bunch of people probably help finance this story. So this is a crazy story because it's about something they've heard about and something that I've seen. People have stickers of this quote unquote business on their car. So what it is people will call your house and just say, hey, we're representing police. We're representing the local police. We're representing local firefighters for the fraternity of firefighters, so they can have a place to drink and whatever. They have like elk lodges that they converted to fraternal brotherhood of the police, whatever. They can just go there and drink because cops can't go to a bar and just drink because they'll be heckled. So they converted all these like elk lodges into places for them to drink, and people that call on behalf of them and say like, hey, can we just get some money to help these cops out, blah, blah, blah. And so they're like, oh yeah, but it's for the elk lodge, but it's also if they get shot in the line of duty or hurt in the line of duty, then it can help pay the medical bills, blah, 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 blah. Spoiler alert for this, big spoiler alert for this whole thing. If you don't want spoilers for this, skip ahead for a little bit, but they were not calling on their behalf at all. It was sort of they got involved through which they were committing crimes. This is a crime, to call and pretend you're calling on behalf of charity, and you're really not doing that. Because telemarketing is such a hard scam to stop, the cops just say, well, give us 10% of your earnings and we'll just not do anything. So that's how they keep getting away with it. And so if you see on a car like a sheriff's badge with like fraternal brotherhood of police or whatever, that person got scammed, unfortunately.
Interesting.
People were taking millions, hundreds, thousands of dollars, people's money. They didn't really have it, but they thought, I'm giving it to a good cause, blah, blah, blah. It is a fascinating documentary, 3-part documentary, 1 hour each. I rated it pretty low on Letterboxd just because I felt like the main sort of guy we're following through this has sort of not a mental disability, but very kind of slow and has very, I don't know, probably onset of autism, and just he can't really communicate his thoughts very well, and is very, very, very poor and very, yeah, just I felt like they're taking advantage of him after a while, just because of the things that they had him do. So I rated it a little bit low for the last episode, but I do think it's worth it. Just check out the first two, just see the history of this. They had these guys on camera, just drinking and doing drugs on the job. One of my favorite moments from those videos of them talking about, Big Ed. Big Ed was the biggest seller here. He sold blah 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 this amount, and they would show clips of him at his desk, and he's just sitting there like nodding off as he's calling somebody, and he's just nodding off, and then when they pick up, he's like, "Hello, sir, ma'am, I am calling on behalf of the police of this blah blah blah," and he's just like able to just get into that mode, even though he's like tripping balls half the time.
Better Call Saul.
Yeah, it's a Better Call Saul of telemarketers. Yeah. It's incredible. One of the best docs I've seen in a while. So highly recommend checking that out.
Very nice.
So there's that.
To give that a watch.
Yeah. So you checked out this week Totally Killer. This is a new horror movie on Apple or Amazon Prime. What'd you think of this?
I thought it was pretty fun. It was pretty solid. A lot of times they will pitch movies like this is X meets Y, and this was. I've never seen something that was just two movies kind of slapped together to the extent that this was just Halloween meets Back to the Future. Like that's what this was.
Yeah.
Or maybe, like maybe more closer to like a Halloween or like a Friday the 13th, just, a slasher film, masked killer chasing you down, but it's also a time travel movie, and they frequently invoke Back to the Future in the movie. But it's a lot of fun. Karina Shipka is in it. She's really great. Then her mom, who is in the present, played by Julie Bowen, is really great. And then I am spacing on her name. She's from Cloak and Dagger, but her in the past, they kind of like...
Olivia Holt.
Olivia Holt, thank you. Yes, yep. Olivia Holt's really great in it. And also this one, like the first Friday the 13th, like the first Scream, which they also, of course, invoke in this. There's my favorite slasher films are ones that are also murder mysteries where you're trying to figure out who the killer is.
Yeah.
That's very much the case in this one. So I had a lot of fun with it. It was just a cool genre mashup, honestly.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, they had Freaky was, Freaky Friday meets Halloween or whatever. So that's a very interesting combination there. And also this one is as well. So yeah, probably checking this out. This seems very cool. Yeah. So you also checked out Poltergeist. Is this the first time watch for you?
I had never seen Poltergeist.
Nice.
I was watching a similar movie for Underrated. And so another one of those haunted house movies. So I was like, well, I should probably watch Poltergeist to understand some context and stuff, even though Poltergeist came out after the one I watched, Burnt Offerings. This is... I watched it and I was like, I wish I had seen this as a kid because this is like perfect kid horror. It's not particularly scary, I don't think. There's one face ripping off sequence that's pretty whoa. But other than that, it's incredibly tame, I think. But yeah, it's a fun supernatural, Tobe Hooper / actually probably Steven Spielberg movie from the 80s.
Yeah. This is one that was on the rotation for me when I was a kid. It was this Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. Watch the sequels of these, which was.
I hear they're not great.
They're not great.
I have no plans to watch them.
Yeah, they're not.
Although
great.
Laura Palmer's in one of them, right?
I'm not sure about that. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, the first Poltergeist, incredible. I love the a lot of great practical effects. The clown scene in the kids' room always sticks in my mind. You have that one scene of the that giant like white demon thing with giant claws and giant
that was kind of spooky.
That was kind of spooky. What else? So yeah, I mean you've probably heard about the curse of this movie, right? About how many people have passed away from this movie. Did you know that they attribute the curse to the fact that they use real skeletons when
I have heard that.
The mother is in the pool. Yeah, so that's not great.
Yeah, this is a movie about like, hey, maybe you should have respect for people's dead bodies and not utilize those to make just kind of use those and ignore them to make a bunch of money. But that's kind of what they did in the movie itself. So
yeah, one of the classic lines from this movie is you moved the tombstones, but you didn't move the bodies.
You moved the tombstones, but you didn't move the bodies. Mr. Incredible.
What was I going to say? This was the idea of this is that there's a haunting here because, it's built on ancient burial ground, and also The Shining is that. But it's like, if we're gonna have, if the conceit is, if the idea is that the haunting is only concentrated to one area where bodies were buried, Native American bodies were buried, then all of North America should be haunted all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
It really should be. It really should be. So yeah,
it's all Native American burial ground.
Yes, absolutely. So there's that. I checked out The Pope's Exorcist. This is the Julius Avery movie, obviously starring Russell Crowe. And that's really the biggest name here.
The Pope is his exorcist. Mamma mia.
This was really fun. This is just like a fun, fun romp, basically. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's got some really interesting, prosthetic moments. It's got some interesting, it's not really scary. It's just like, because this guy is just like, I'm going to fuck you up. I'm going to fuck this devil up. It's like as close to Constantine as you can get, but still be a priest.
I was in a gladiator.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's got him doing basically the accent he used in Thor: Love and Thunder. So if you want to hear that for
he's Greek in that. He's Italian in this. Oh, okay. Big distinction.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, very, very fun. I'll just say that. One of the funnest Exorcist movies I've seen in a long time. One of the funnest. I think this. If I had to guess, I would say Russell Crowe had a lot of fun making this. So you can definitely see that in his face there. I also checked out. Yeah,
I really wanted to see this. Yeah. But I went out to watch it, and then I discovered that I couldn't watch Netflix anymore because
I saw that.
Netflix. I posted it to the Instagram. Netflix finally cracked down and cut me off from my parents' account. So I was like, well, I guess I'm not watching that tonight.
Yeah, a lot of these fucking sites are cracking down now. I just turned on on YouTube the other day, like, hey, we noticed you got an ad blocker. That sucks. Turn that off.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yep. So, I'm just going to put this out there, but it's on the PLEX, so you can check that out there. Let's see what else we got here. VHS 85. I've watched all of these. This is like now a yearly tradition put out by Shudder. This is a now Shudder original thing that they've been doing. I believe this whole thing started in 2012. I'm not sure who was the first one. Let me see if I can pull that up, because I remember watching the first one. The first one came out alongside the ABCs of Death, which was an anthology movie that was about, A is for whatever, then the short would be about that word. It was very, very sort of interesting premise there. The VHS is American Horror Anthology, including 6 found footage films, blah, 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 blah. I just want to know when the first one started. First one was October 5th, 2012. Had directors David Bruckner, so he's been there from the beginning. Ty West did one for the first one. Joe Swanberg did one for the first one. So he's had very interesting directors putting their name to this stuff. Eduardo Sanchez from the Blair Witch, one of the creators of the Blair Witch, did one for the second one. So now we're doing, yearly ones. There was VHS 99, VHS 94. This is VHS 87. This is very interesting. I think this is one of the
85.
85, yes, thank you. Very interesting, like, construction of the whole, the whole movie is that there's this weird object, or there's a weird figure in this room watching a TV, and it's emitting this weird frequency off of it, and it keeps coming back and forth between that one. Usually these movies will have, like, it's a news thing and they were watching different news clips, or I think one of the first ones was like cops busted into an abandoned house and they found all these tapes and they put the tape into the VCR, and that's what starts the short. This one just kind of like cuts back and forth. There's no real mechanic to why we're watching what we're watching, but it's still very interesting. Some of these are very cool. The first one of them, one of my favorite ones was just called No Wake, which was about a group of people in an RV go to a camp at a lake, and they're one by one picked off by this guy that's shooting them with a sniper rifle. But then they come back to life because something in the water is making them come back to life, and then that sort of loops around to the last one, because one of them finds the killer's the the van's license plate. So they at the end they're like, let's get these motherfuckers or whatever, and then it comes back to them later on. Yeah, very cool. If you're into that, into the shorts that are like 20-30 minutes, and also into this sort of stuff, found footage. They're obviously all found footage, so there's that conceit of like why these still filming that we talked about last time. But very good. One of them has. Let me see if I can find his name real quick. One of my favorite actors. I haven't seen him in a lot of things, but he was one of the morticians in 6 Feet Under. Something Rodriguez. Let me see if I can find his name real quick.
While you look, I just want to say, I know that last year's one, VHS 99, was done by Joseph and Vanessa Winter and starred Melanie Stone. And I just actually watched another found footage movie that they did when I'm covering on today's episode of Underrated, Deadstream. So nice. I had a lot of fun with that. So I might need to check these out. Yeah,
they're very good. Freddy Rodriguez is the guy I'm trying to think of. Great actor. Was obviously, like I said, in 6 Feet Under, an Ugly Betty, apparently. So, yeah, very cool. Let's see. Let's go back to you. Checked out No One Will Save You. I mentioned watching this last time. What did you make of this?
I thought it was fine. It was, like sometimes these movies that are built on a gimmick of like, no one in this movie says anything. It's a completely wordless movie. They can kind of be a little bit gimmicky. I'm a big fan of Caitlin Dever. I think she's very good in this, very good at being scared. And yeah, I mean, I was maybe a little intoxicated too when I saw it, so I wasn't following the plot completely. Yeah. But it was fine. It wasn't the best thing in the world, but I didn't hate it either.
Yeah. I've recently started doing gummies, doing some edibles because they're what do they call it? The legal-ish around here. And I watched Altered States. I'll talk about that in a minute, but yeah.
Oh, how appropriate.
I was watching Altered States in an altered state. Yes. Yeah. So I know what you mean there. I watched things in an altered state. Yeah, it was okay. Like I did think the ending because I wanted to ask you about the ending because I thought it was very interesting of her because it's a a Steppenwise thing. It's a what's the movie Invasion of the Bystanders sort of deal, right? And so she seems like. I'm laughing because it's like the aliens picked her up and were like, "You're fucked up. You had a lot of trauma. So therefore, we're not gonna probe you. We're not gonna change you into one of us. We're not gonna change you into a mindless alien slave or whatever." And fuck, I just lost it because there was another thing where somebody like was saved because of their trauma. They were like, "Oh, you're too fucked up." Damn it, what was it? Because somebody was talking about it on a podcast and I was like, "Oh, because they're doing on the Last Picture Show podcast, they paired this with Under the Skin. You've seen that recently. And so one of the big connections I made that they didn't make was that in Under the Skin, Scarlett Johansson takes the man with the disfigured face, right, and doesn't do whatever she normally does with the people because she felt bad for him. So I thought that was an interesting connection between those two of like, Caitlin Dever in this has, trauma from her past, and the aliens see that and they're like, okay, we're going to not fuck with you because you're obviously in a very fragile mental state. And that was the same thing that happened in Under the Skin. So it was, interesting connection there.
Yeah. I don't even remember that. I remember that guy. I didn't remember she spared him in Under the Skin, but that makes me feel a little better about that.
Yeah. You also checked out a movie I'm very interested in seeing because it's not playing around here. We can't find it anywhere online. The Royal Hotel.
Yes. This was pretty good. I think it was interesting. It's from the same director of The Assistant, so that will give you an idea of the kind of subject matter that this film is handling. It is pretty heavy-handed though. It is not subtle, and it's kind of just being like, men are the worst, and I'm like, I know, I get it. I've lived on this earth for 34 years. I know that men are pretty terrible. And it's interesting. I think that there's some good performances in this. I think I was expecting it to be more of a two-hander than it was. It ended up being, I thought it was going to be kind of equal parts between Jessica Henwick and Julie Gardner, but it was much more of a Julie Garner movie. but yeah, I also like Australian stuff, and getting to hear Hugo Weaving be like, what's going on? You can't, it was pretty great. So overall, I think it was definitely worth seeing.
Nice, yeah, definitely need to check that out for this year. Yeah. One of the big ones.
I saw it with a friend who is a woman, and I was just like, I feel like I just need to apologize to you for something.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. So I'm gonna go through a couple of these pretty quickly because there's I'm not sure what to make of them. Phantom Carriage was one of the movies on the Hooptober list. It was one of the ones I picked out for the 1920s era to see. This is directed by Victor Stordrum. Let's see. I'm gonna copy and paste that. Yeah, it's got like S's and J's and O's and the umlauts in there. The umlauts, yeah. Umlaut's a great word to say. Let me put this in here. Victor Stordrum, that thing. Great, actually really great silent movie from 1921. It has a lot of things that Wes Anderson loves to do in his movies, where it's a nesting doll of a movie, where it's a story within a story within a story. So it's very ahead of its time in that respect. Really well used of like special effects even back then. Really well acted. I thought that was one of the best silent films I've seen actually. This and like City Lights, Chaplin City Lights, I would put up there as one of the best silent movies. And a really great horror film. All in all, so you can check that stuff out. That's one of those I've been finding more and more stuff actually on YouTube, like very good quality versions of that.
Public domain now, yeah.
Yes. So that was good. I would recommend checking that out. And then one thing I would not recommend checking out, if only to laugh at how bad it is. This is not something that is so good it's bad. This is just bad, and it's not worth anyone's time. Thankfully, it's like 86 minutes running time is. Movie is Dracula 3000. I watched this because one of the challenges, one of the criteria of the Hooptober challenge was to watch the lowest rated Dracula movie on Letterboxd that you haven't seen. So this is the one that
explains
first.
Why I've been seeing this crop up on a couple of people's Letterboxds, and I was like, what the fuck?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is why. That's probably why. This is a horror movie directed by Daryl Rudent, starring Casper Van Diem, Erica Allant, Tom Tiny Lister, which most people will know as the president in Fifth Element. He was in that. He's also Zeus in No Holds Barred. He also stars Coolio, and also has cameos by Udo Kier, who was he the guy in, I think he was the scientist in the Human Centipede movies. So Dracula 3000, the premise is a cargo ship salvage crew is out in space. They get a distress signal from the Demeter. And so they board the Demeter and they're like, what's going on here? What's all these secret things? Why is there weird noises? Why there's no crew? And so they figure out that Dracula is on the ship. They find this cargo bay with a bunch of caskets on it. One of them bleeds on it, obviously, resurrecting Dracula. They get picked off one by one. They figure out that who Dracula is, what a vampire is. Of course, they're like, oh, we have to kill him with real stakes, with real wood. When was real wood made? Because you got all the synthetic wood. It's like, thankfully these pool cues were made in 2950, the last time any real wood was ever manufactured, and they just happened to be on the ship with Dracula. That's convenient. So it's fucking ridiculous. They what the fuck happened in this movie? They are, everybody gets picked off one by one in ridiculous fashion. This is a great example of a movie. This should be shown in film class of this is what happens if you run out of money. This is what happens if you don't have enough money, don't have a script. And this is what happens when you just end a film. Because the end of this film is, Tommy Lister and this robot that turns out to be a robot. They figure out she's a robot because Dracula doesn't want to bite her. Oh, by the way, they found out that Dracula is from the planet Transylvania, which is a planet full of vampires. So there's that. Dracula tries to get into the bridge of the ship. They close the door on his arm. He runs off. We never see him again. He's apparently dead. Next, they cut to them on the bridge of the ship. They're like, how long to the sun? Because they have to go to the sun. They can't just turn the ship facing the sun for some reason. They're like, we have about 8 hours before we get to the sun. The synthetic robot is like, oh, okay. hey, did you know that I'm not only, a galactic robot, I'm also a service robot, I'm a pleasure robot. And he goes like, what? Say no more. He puts her on his shoulder, runs off camera. They cut to Uokir saying, I made a mistake. I should have just blown up the ship. Ship blows up, cut to credits. I'm like, what the fuck? What just happened? Really? I had to rewind it like 4 times to make sure I didn't miss anything. It literally just ends. I've never seen a movie with, actors like actual actors, A-list actors.
Yeah.
At the time, A-list actors, but a movie with a budget, with stars, with a script. I've never seen a movie end that way. It's incredible. Just it's incredible just to watch it just for the ending. Really, really insane ending. So, yeah. There's that.
I remember first hearing about that movie, and somebody was like, this was a couple years ago, and somebody was like, I just watched Dracula 3000. It's really bad. I was like, oh no, the bad Dracula movie is called Dracula 2000. They're like, no, it's worse. It's even worse than Dracula 2000. It's another 100 years of badness.
Yeah, not related though.
Another 1,000 years.
If you're worried that you missed something in Dracula 2000, Dracula 2000 is a standalone. Yeah, by itself. Okay. So there's that.
So I don't have to watch Dracula 1000 before either of those?
No, unfortunately, do not have to watch any of those. Let's go to Loki. Loki came out right after our last recording session. This is obviously season 2 of the show that started in 2021. One of the most heralded and best received of the MCU TV shows. Probably head and shoulders above many of them.
And the Damian pendulum swings back the other direction on Marvel.
Listen, it's not the Damian pendulum; it's the MCU pendulum. Quality, my friend. Quality,
you just quality. Like every other one. And I was like, I said this to you when we were texting. Yeah. You really hated Secret Invasion, so I knew you were really gonna like Loki season 2.
I sent you,
I'm sure you're gonna hate the
Marvels.
The Marvels. But then probably What If will come out after that, and you'll be like, "What If is so great?"
Yeah, well, things contain multitudes, my friend. Things contain multitudes. They can be one thing and another. So we've seen 2 episodes so far. Let's see, get the actual episode names. First one is called Ouroboros, where they meet and hang out with Ki-hee Kwan, who is in this season this time, which is great to see him in here. Next episode is called Breaking Brad. What did you thought of these 2 episodes so far?
I had a lot of fun with these. I was really back on board. I love the whole vibe of Loki. I love the kind of retro futuristic. They're in this weird other world, and I'm very curious to see where things go, because the end of episode 2 seemed to imply that they just destroyed that lady from Game of Thrones just destroyed a shit ton of alternate timelines, not all the other ones. So I'm like, that's interesting. Just mass genocide going on, much worse than anything Thanos did. Is that going to stick? Is that going to be reversed in some way? But yeah, this is a lot. It's the same vibes from the first season that I loved so much are continuing in this season.
Yeah. So I enjoyed this episode of television. I enjoyed the one previous to this episode of television. The Loki and Mobius, pitter patter back and forth was very good. The X5, back and forth witticisms was very funny. I feel like those are some best stuff of this, show. And I think they should do more of that. The problem with doing more of that is that you're not pushing the plot forward. And I think a TV show that's 10 episodes, 12 episodes, 15 episodes, I think that stuff would land differently with me if you had more time. But knowing that this is a six episode series, I feel like we're going to look back on the end of this at the end of the season and be like, oh, they didn't have time for that stuff. You know what I mean? I think going forward, I think they're going to look at this and say, we got to do more. We got to do more episodes if we're going to have, scenes like this, we're going to have dynamics like this, we're going to have writing like this, that they need to give the shows more of a runway in order for those things to not take up the time at which they could be using to push the plot forward. I want this dynamic, I want this writing, I want this banter, in addition to taking the time to then seed the plot points, because I feel like the end of the episode kind of abrupt, because they Sylvie touches X5 and is like, oh, they're gonna, the woman from Game of Thrones is gonna massacre a bunch of people. I think that was very kind of abrupt there because they took the time to, have those character beats. I want to be clear, I want all of this. I want both. And I think they can do both. I think they can do the character beats. They can do the character growth. They can do interpersonal relationship growth. They can do a lot of that stuff, but not in a 6-episode season. So I think that I might go to the end of the season. I think a lot of people are going to go to the end of the season and be like, that was great episode of TV, but because you took that, one episode, because you took those 25, 30 minutes to sort of nurture that relationship and nurture those characters, it didn't leave time for the plot to naturally be metered out. You know what I mean?
I mean, maybe it's hard. I mean, I haven't seen. We're only 2 episodes into the season, so who knows what's going to happen? I thought the pacing on the last season was very good. Now we've already established most of those characters, so I think it's going to be. I don't see any problems with the pacing. I don't foresee anything. It might happen, but
it could be.
There's not really any indicators to me necessarily about that.
Yeah. Very interesting torture device. He just puts him in a box and is like box boarding him, water box boarding him, that little cube. He's very funny. This guy, this actor, let's see if I can pull up his name real quick. I don't have the thing right in front of me. He was in a movie called Blind Spotting in 2018, I want to say, maybe earlier than that. Let's see. Rafael Casal was Hunter X5. He was in the movie Blind Spotting with, what was his name? Let's see. Did you see Blind Spotting?
I did not. I've heard good things about it, but I have not seen it.
Yes. So it was Davies was also his sort of co-star in that. Yep. Very good. So there's that. What we've both been watching. Let's see. Yeah, sticking with TV for a second. Lessons in Chemistry finally came out. Talked about reading the book earlier this year. Was the book written by Bonnie Garmis. This is starring Brie Larson, Lewis Pullman, the son of that guy, Bill Pullman. And it is basically about a woman in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, who is trying to make a career in academia, in chemistry, trying to figure out molecules and things and such. a lot of big words being thrown around that I don't necessarily understand, but I think they do a very good job of delivering that sort of techno jargon. Definitely would recommend checking this out if you have Apple TV Plus. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'll have to check it. I know that the book was a really big deal. It was like the Barnes and Noble Book of the Year or whatever last year.
Yeah, very cool. So there's that. Also checked out a couple of episodes of The Fall of the House of Usher. Mike Flanagan's his last project for Netflix. I guess that was the end of his deal and end of his contract. Obviously, the director and writer of Honey of Hill House, which I don't know if we've ever talked about, is one of my favorite pieces of fiction in the last 10 years. I really, really loved it. I've only seen it once, only because it's 8 hours. Like I said, there's too much shit to watch. Definitely too much shit to be going back to an 8-hour thing. But I really, really, really want to. I think that was one of the best things I've seen in a very long time. The only thing I haven't seen of his that he put on Netflix was the Haunting of Bly Manor, which came out the year after Hill House. I checked out, Midnight Mass was, probably my second favorite thing that he's done for Netflix. Very, very good.
Big fan of that show. Big fan of that show.
Loved it. I loved it. That was, if we're mixing sort of TV and movie stuff, I would say that's probably up there in my top 5 favorite things from that year. Last year, I believe he did Midnight Club. I think it was more of a YA type thing. But this is definitely not YA. The Fall of House of Usher is not YA. It is probably his most horny thing he's ever done. Just a lot of sex, a lot of debauchery in that sector, in that aspect. This is definitely one very, very different in that respect, because I've seen a lot of his stuff. He did Dr. Sleep, which was the sequel book to The Shining, which obviously had a lot of that sort of stuff in there, but this is definitely far and above his most mature and adult thing that is I think he's ever been a part of, which definitely sets it apart from those other things. Definitely makes you sit up and say, oh wow, this is different. This is something that's separate from all the other stuff in terms of tone, in terms of sex, in terms of violence. Very, very violent stuff is going on in a lot of this show. Very grim stuff. But yeah, I've certainly seen the first 2 episodes, like I said, and they are very, very good. So yeah, definitely highly recommend checking this out.
Yeah, I'm a huge Flanagan fan, especially, like I said, Midnight Mass. I think that, like Scorsese, he's very interesting when he's touching on his things about Catholic guilt and mixing that into horror and all that stuff is really cool and it's interesting and fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see. Go back to you. You watched Hubie Halloween. This wasn't your assignment for losing the summer movie wager, right? So what?
No. Do you want to reveal that, by the way? Because we haven't revealed it yet on the show.
I would reveal it. I'm very excited to reveal it.
Okay.
This is not me buying time to figure out what I assigned you.
Okay.
Do you have it on
while
hand?
You're looking through text messages, it was something I was not excited for. I remember that.
Yes.
But I'm at my parents' house right now. While they're on vacation, and my brother is living here at the moment, and we were hanging out. I came over the other night, and we were like, let's watch some spooky movies. And for a long time, my mom was like, have you seen the Hoobie yet? You would love Hoobie. And my brother's like, it's pretty dumb, but it's fun. And I watched it, and it's not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it really does feel like kind of like a greatest hits of like Sandler's early work. It's like a lot of Sandler's frequent collaborators are in this, but there's a lot of just like little references and Easter eggs to like Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore and The Waterboy. And, he even feels very much like a very Waterboy, like the character that he plays in this Hoobie Du Bois is very, very Waterboy-like. Oh yes, I believe I'm here to be the Halloween manto. So it's pretty ridiculous. But if you, it's not gonna, it's not exactly Hamlet, but it's a fun watch regardless. If you go in with the right attitude,
Yeah, exactly. Just want to have fun. So
I gave it 3 stars.
Of course you did. Yes, very good. So there's that. So the assignment I gave you for losing the summer movie wager was the 2017 much lauded Snowman, directed by Thomas Alfredson, right?
Yes.
Okay.
A part of a series of Harry Hole novels, Detective Harry Hole.
I can't believe that's his actual name. Oh
right? Like, did they? I get maybe like it, like in whatever Norwegian, like Scandinavian country that it was in. This probably wasn't like a double entendre, but I'm like, change the name when you put it in English. Come on, man.
Yes. This is a famously bad movie. 7% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, not great. 2 out of 10 stars on IMDb. Stars Michael Fassbender, Rebecca Ferguson, Charlotte Gainsborough, Val Kilmer, apparently, J.K. Simmons. Yeah, you have fun with that, my friend.
All right.
All right. So before we get to top 5 most influential movies, why don't we take a break, and we'll be coming back with that, and also Letterboxd assignments. And so we will see you in a minute. And we're back talking top 5 most influential horror movies. So like with a lot of top 5s we do, did you find that you were like, well, this is the movie that I think is influential, or is this more objective list than you usually make?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these aren't necessarily my favorite movies.
Yeah.
In fact, one of them I haven't even seen. But it's impossible to deny its influence on horror films. So some of them I do like quite a bit, but I think this one is more like, this is less of a personal taste thing and just looking at how things have changed the genre of horror.
Yeah. Just looking at my list, I did a quick audible for number 5. It definitely is like, the sort of genre-defying movies, the ones that you look back on, and that the ones that created most of the tropes, the ones that have the staying power. You can go back and visit them. I find a lot of stuff on my list are ones that are sort of timeless. They sort of what's that word? ascend time, not ascend time, supersede time. They go above time, whatever the word is. Yeah, a lot of them are just like, yes, of course, that is the thing that started it all. That's the one that everything else pays homage to. That's the ones on my list are the ones that, directors that are going to that genre, like, we're looking at that movie and we're playing with it and we're, upending expectations of that trope that movie invented. So, in that way, it's not just that they invented tropes, is that they invented tropes and they invented, they came up with the stuff that people are going to be playing with for the next 50, 60 years. So very, very interesting list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
my list is, like the same, where it's stuff that spans throughout all of film history and across the world. I've got 2 American films, but the rest are all from other countries. Oh, interesting. I have all American. That'd be interesting to know what you have. So I'll start off. Number 5 for me, Halloween. Start off. It's not. It's not like if you're academic, you're like, well, actually, with P.P. Tom in 1950, blah, blah. I don't care. This is the one that's like, girl alone, babysitter alone, guy with a knife coming to kill her. Killer doesn't die. Killer, seems to be knocked out or dead. You go look where the killer's sitting. He's not there. Just classic. And the mask thing. I'm looking up what's the first mask killer? And I guess technically it's like Phantom of the Opera. There's other sort of guys with masks that you could sort of go back to, but this is like, person with a mask, person with an aesthetic, everything else they're wearing, the slow moving killer. This very much started that trend. So yeah, just fucking Halloween, man. It's the one for me. Yeah. In that genre. That's yeah. It's very, very important to not to horror films, but very specifically slasher films is a subgenre that might not exist without Halloween. Yes. What's your number 5? My number 5 is, and we're talking influential. What can be more influential? I guess 4 movies on my list, but what can be more influential than the first ever horror movie? And that is Georges Méliès's The Haunted Castle from 1896. Wow. Okay. So it's the first ever horror movie. According to a lot of critics, it's a 3-minute movie. He actually remade the movie a year later. And did a colorized version. But yeah, it's, talk about tropes and stuff like that. It's like a guy who goes into a spooky castle and things start happening and chairs disappear and bats show up and the devil's there. And, it's very short. It's very simple, but, you can see all of the building blocks that, 40 years of cinema following would replicate. Yeah, very cool. I actually haven't heard of that. This is probably, I would imagine that's on YouTube. Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's very easy to find. Nice, very cool. Make sure you're watching the right one, because there's the 1986 version and the 1987 version. Both called either The Haunted Castle or I believe the original name is Le Manoir du Diable. So I think it's actually The Devil's House is a more accurate translation. Yeah. But it was kind of released as The Haunted Castle. So yeah. One of those weird things from early cinema where it's like there's 8 names for this movie. Yeah, it's very cool. My number 4, Night of the Living Dead. Another one where you could be like, well, I Walk with a Zombie, or it's like that series of coffin guy movies, My Guy with a Coffin, or whatever they're called, from the 60s, late 50s, early 60s. But yeah, excuse me. I watched this fairly recently, in the past 4 years. I got the Criterion Blu-ray, a bunch of different features, fully restored, looks great. And the tropes of the asshole guy who's like, I'm not infected, my kid's not infected. You got that. You got a bunch of slow moving zombies is there. You have you said Night, right? The first one? Yes, sir. Night of the Living Dead? Okay. Yes, sir. Let me look up that up. I think it was 68? Yes, 1968. Okay. Yeah, George Romero, obviously. They're coming for you, Barbara. They're going to eat you, Barbara. That line is always great. Yeah.
it's and I think the main character wasn't initially supposed to be black. I think he stepped in for somebody else at the last minute, but then you have to go back and be like, okay, that's I think, who was it that said like horror movies are, their reaction to the times, and this is very much that. Even though I believe this, wasn't intended for the survivor to be black and then shot by police as they're pulling up, even though he wasn't bitten. So you have that sort of social critique and social commentary in there, and that's sort of that in and of itself is a theme you see running out throughout movies for the next 50 years. So very interesting that sort of unintentional trope that they was birthed there. So yeah, really really highly recommend checking this out if people haven't. The OG in a lot of ways.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my number 4. What is your number 4?
My number 4. This is the one that I actually haven't seen that I really have been trying to watch for a while, just have never gotten around to it. And that is the original Japanese version of Ringu or Ring. And yeah, nice. This is hugely huge. J-horror is a big thing now. I think it is. This style of horror has really permeated throughout the United States, but before this movie, it wasn't. You had the 80s and 90s were as a pick further up on my list, and one that was already on your list, might not be the same movie, might be the same movie, has indicated they were dominated by slasher sequels, just these hack and slash movies with a lot of jump scares and a lot of that stuff, whereas Ringu is just a lot more disturbing, a lot more making you feel unsettled. And that is really much more my jam. That's my favorite kind of horror movie. And there were certainly J-horror fans at that time, but it was a lot more like you had to know somebody who had like a VHS of this, and you would trade, because there was no Netflix. There was no ways for people to really get these movies. They weren't typically even in regular. You couldn't go to Best Buy and be like, let me get this Japanese VHS horror film. Right. You had to know somebody, and that's how the remake, the Ring, came to be. Is that I believe it was what's his name, the guy who did Pirates of the Caribbean, right?
Gore Verbinski.
Gore Verbinski, yeah. Somebody lent him a copy of their Ringu, and he was like, "Oh, this is really interesting," and remade it in America, and then that caught on, and just it became, this really important, influential thing.
Yes, absolutely. The Ring, the American version, I think I've watched the original, the Japanese Ring, and I think it's one of those things I just prefer the American version just a little bit better. I think it just got aesthetically more interesting. I think the original is, it feels like Audition. It feels like a very there's nothing really like. The thing about the American Ring is it's very like seaside, and you got these horses, and you got all these very Naomi Watts' character puts her hand up to the screen, and that fly comes off of the screen, which I think maybe was part of the first one, but thinking back on sort of the moments and the set pieces and the images that sort of are evocative of the Ring, the American version, I think just has so much more going for it than the original Japanese version. To me,
but I would say that those exist because it's the remake of the original. Though that I think that makes like I said, like I'm not saying these are my 5 favorites. Sure, I haven't even seen this one. That's why it is so influential. It influenced the American one, which then would go on to help J-horror become mainstream, and all these tropes that were in both this one and the American remake became so huge. And I think that speaks to its influence.
Yes, absolutely. So I've been trying to find it, but apparently there was a adaptation done in 1995. The book is actually quite old. It's from 91, and I thought there was a first adaptation done in 1995, and then they did a different one in 98. It's a very actually really old series in Japan. It's always interesting to look back on when these things actually started. That was your number 4, correct?
Yep. Correct.
My number 3 is Scream. I figured I was going to do Scream or New Nightmare, which is also sort of meta commentary on Wes Craven's work. There's really nothing before that. I tried to look up, what is a meta commentary sort of horror movie before Scream, and there really wasn't anything there. So yeah, I really, 96, 97, I was 10 or 11, so a little young to watch those, but I did definitely see them later on when Part 3 came out and the rest of them came out, and definitely influenced one of the best sort of parody movie franchises, at least the first two. What are they called?
Scary Movie.
Scary Movie. Thank you. Yeah, the first two are actually incredible. Great parody.
Which everybody, I'm sure knows this, but originally the working title for Scream was Scary Movie.
Yes, interesting because the guy called up and was like, "What's your scary movie?" Yeah, just I think they get very convoluted very, very quickly. I know even the first one was like, they're killing people because her mother slept around. It's like, what? Why? What? Doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So, if anybody hasn't seen New Nightmare, I would definitely recommend that. It is very, very interesting. I think it's some of the best makeup work on Freddy that I've seen. Very interesting sweater, very interesting aesthetics in that movie. Of like, the thing I always remember from New Nightmare is when the kid is like either falling asleep or is about to fall asleep, and he's looking under his sheet, and he has like this stuffed animal up near his feet underneath the covers, and he looks up and he pulls up the cover, and the stuffed animal has like cuts in it from the glove, obviously, and he also that's the way he sort of transports himself to the other world, is sort of going underneath the covers and sort of keeps crawling, and eventually falls out into a like a boiler room, as it were. New Nightmare is incredible. Really, really great. Highly recommend that, and Scream as well.
Yeah, some very good. And I think horror this is one I didn't end up putting on my list, but I really considered it because I think horror is so meta today. I think it is probably the most meta genre. It's something that is very easy to work that in. Something that, for example, like I love Cabin in the Woods. I think that is an incredibly meta movie, and I don't think we would got all these great meta commentaries on horror films and films in general if it wasn't for Scream paving the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my number 3. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is a movie that I just talked about on this show last week, and that is The Blair Witch Project. It's impossible to deny. This is a film that I thought was okay. Didn't hate it like some people. Didn't love it either like some people. But it's definitely impossible to deny its massive, massive influence on horror, especially like low budget horror. They moved away from the kind of slasher campy stuff that I talked about in the 80s and 90s, and moved into more serious stuff because of movies like this and Ringu, which incidentally, I believe, no, the Ringu came out a year before. Maybe they came out at the same time in the US. I don't know. But Blair Witch Project, kicked off the whole found footage horror crave. It kicked off the minimalism in horror craze, which are both very, very prevalent in modern horror. So I think that it is almost impossible to overstate how important this movie is when it comes to horror films.
Yeah, I mean, it just explodes after that. There's a couple just on the Wikipedia site, because I know there's a couple. Cannibal Holocaust is obviously technically a found footage movie with horrific imagery in it. You have UFO Abduction from 89, Man Bites Dog in 93. Apparently there's one Peter Jackson did called Forgotten Silver from 95. I never even heard of this movie. Little Sister.
But I wouldn't say any of those are influential. Nobody's even heard of those,
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, if we're talking, like, what's the first ones and then what's the most influential leading up to. I'm just saying, I'm highlighting these just to show how quickly it picked up the pace after Blair Witch, because Cannibal Holocaust was 80, Man Bites Dog was 93, so that's 13 years between those two. And then 3 years later is Blair Witch in 99. Blair Witch in 99, then you have August Underground 2001, just a bunch of them. Incident Loch Ness, September Tapes. I haven't seen a lot of these. Norori the Curse is a great found footage movie in 2005. And then from there, Poughkeepsie Tapes in 2007. I just saw that just recently. That's very, very good. And then if you look at the Wikipedia article, it's like 5 in 2007, bunch in 2008, Wreck in 2009, and then, it's a bunch of them every single year after that. So, absolutely incredible. This is my number 2. That is number 2.
Nice, perfect segue.
Yes, that is my number 2 Blair Witch Project. Yep, you said everything. I said it all last week as well. So we'll move on to your number 2.
My number 2 is you had talked about how influential Halloween was with the slasher genre, and you had kind of alluded that, like, it wasn't necessarily, there were some proto slashers before. You had stuff like Peeping Tom or Psycho. It could be considered a proto slasher. It's not even the first slasher kind of film set at a holiday with Black Christmas. But I really considered putting Halloween up here, but I had to go with a different slasher film, one that I think is influential for a different reason. It is honestly kind of a knockoff of Halloween, but that is Friday the 13th, Part 2. And the reason that I'm saying Part 2 is because Part 2 is obviously the one where Jason shows up. The first one is kind of more of a murder mystery. It doesn't have a traditional slasher, like it's more like Psycho than it is like Halloween, to be honest. But 2, which came out a year after the first one, really kicked off the craze of sequels, of horror franchises. It was like, this is the thing that we're going to do. And I know Halloween 2 did come out before Friday the 13th 2. But it was like, okay, cool. We just need to finish the story from the first one. This one was like, oh no, we are going to keep making these movies. To the point where, if you look at the 80s, you look at the Friday the 13th franchise.
Yep.
Friday the 13th movie came out in every single year in the 80s except for 2. 8 movies came out in that decade, which is ridiculous. They were just pumping these things out. And other horror franchises started to be like, oh, let's do that too. Even Halloween was influenced by that, because Halloween did the first 2 movies, and then they did a totally different thing for Halloween 3. They were like, okay, the Michael Myers story is over, but then the Friday the 13th franchise is so popular, they come back to Michael Myers for Halloween 4 later on. And then you start to even see stuff that is like these iconic horror movies. A couple of years after Friday the 13th 2 comes out, they get sequels. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, movie which came out in the first one came out in 74, gets a sequel in the 80s. Psycho, movie that came out in 1960, gets a sequel in the 80s. And this really, even to this day, there's a million fucking Insidious movies. There's, everything needs to be a franchise, needs to pump out. Like, look at the Paranormal Activity movie. Look at Saw. Those were movies where they were like releasing like one every single year. Then they stopped for a while, and guess what? They're back, just like the Friday the 13th films, more than any other. And obviously you can go back to like the 30s or 40s or whatever and be like, there was like Frankenstein sequels and stuff. But I think that the way that Friday the 13th, starting with the second one, was like, no, this is the thing where we just pump out more and more movies. Because the first one was supposed to be standalone. The like little Jason reveal at the end was just kind of a knockoff of Carrie. We needed to have a spooky thing at the end, but they're like, no, we've got a horror icon here. We've got the slasher guy that he's going to keep coming back and killing teenagers every fucking year, and people are going to turn out and give us their money. And that is going to be a thing that all the horror franchises do now. And you can trace it all back to that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. The first movie, I think, is probably got to be in the top 10 of most profitable movies of all time. Do you know how much this movie made and how much it cost?
I do not.
First Friday the 13th cost $550,000 and made $59 million. That's got to be up there and most profitable of all time. With
Jason Blum saw that and he was like, I'm going to make that my whole career.
Exactly. Then Marvel saw that and they're like, we're going to do the same thing. Hey, got him.
Oh, okay, because Marvel movies are made for a couple $1,000s.
What else was I going to say? Yeah, just you're right. They're pumping them out. Didn't have a movie in '83. It is wild to look at that and just be like, what happened?
Yeah, they missed 83 and 87. But other than that,
and then Friday. Yeah, I remember watching Jason Goes to Hell as a kid and be like, wow, that's crazy. Have you seen Jason Goes to Hell? The Final Friday.
That's one of the few I haven't seen. I've seen the other Final Friday, Friday the 13th Part 4. but I have not seen, because I actually did a little mini marathon because it was just Friday, October 13th. So
It was, yeah.
I watched 2 through 4 because I hadn't seen them. So
nice.
Yeah.
I was going to say the ending of that, spoiler alert for the ending of Friday the 13th, or Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. They kill him, quote unquote, kill Jason. His mask is in the ground, and or his mask is left because they opened a portal to hell and put him in the portal and then closed the portal. But his mask is left on the ground after the portal is, after the portal closes up, the ground swallows everything up except for the mask. And then the last shot of the movie is his mask on the ground, and Freddy's claw comes up, grabs it, and pulls it down, which I thought was very cool at the time. I was like, "Holy shit!" it's the horror cinematic universe. Yeah, exactly. That was very cool. That was trying to do the math, 10 years before Freddy vs. Jason. So
because the rights are really weird to Friday the 13th. Which is why they had to make Jason X, and that way we've got one remake and nothing else in the last 20 years.
Yes, pretty much. It's been 2009 since the last Friday the 13th, so that's what math, like 14
Yeah, that was
years?
the only thing that we got, the remake, since 2003.
2009 there was one after that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's the only one.
After one. Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying. After 2003. Yep. All right. So that was your number 2. My number 1 is Jaws. Very controversial pick because people are like, it's not a horror movie. Well, it's very scary. Actually, it is quite terrifying. I think the biggest thing, the reason I put this number 1, called it most influential, is because, by accident, very famously, the shark didn't work, so they couldn't show the shark. And I think not showing the violence, not showing the villain, I think has permeated pretty much every. It's got to be on everybody's mind of like, how much do we show? I just watched Ginger Snaps for the first time. It's a movie about 2 girls changing into werewolves very slowly, and I think they showed a little bit too much of the creature by the end there. But I think this is something that every horror director, every horror writer has in the back of their mind of how much do I show? Showing less is obviously something that David Fincher he had a note from the studio, and they told him to show less. So what does he do? He shows the audience. He shows the people standing around the violence and shows their reaction to it. So I do think that had an effect there, and I think it's just not showing the thing, keeping it secret, keeping it to your imagination is something that we talked about. What were we talking about last time where you said that's too much? Oh, Saw. We talked about Saw, and you were like, don't show the violence. And so I think that's very much accidentally. I think Spielberg definitely set a trend there and set a trope there of not showing the creature or the killer or whatever it is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that Jaws, that's a good argument for Jaws being a horror movie. I think I agree with that. It makes sense. Jaws is definitely a movie that has jump scares and it has all this stuff. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yes. Thank you. What is your number 1 most influential horror movie?
So my number 1, taking it around the world again and back a little bit over 100 years. We talked about how influential, like you just did that list where there was a whole genre of Dracula movies, not vampire movies, but specifically Dracula movies.
Yeah.
But I think all of horror is, there's so much of horror that you could trace back to this one early film, a black and white silent masterpiece that is F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu. It's one of the earliest adaptations of Dracula, even though it's an unofficial adaptation of Dracula. It's just got all the spooky tropes that would eventually go on to influence, the Universal monster movies and like spooky guys creeping up hallways. I mean, it's something that even to this day they are constantly referencing, like the shadow walking down the stairs. It is just so that movie is just so ingrained in the absolute DNA of every horror movie that would follow it, that it's like what the Lord of the Rings is to modern fantasy writing is what Nosferatu is to horror film, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I just overall find German expressionism very terrifying. It just has like this brutalist nature to it of just like, oh, I feel gross looking at this because it's so lifeless. It's so sterile. It's so just brutally gross and depressing. And I think you just put anything in that sort of aesthetic, it's going to have this feeling of creepiness and grossness attached to it, no matter what it is.
And like this year alone, like I said, 101 years after this movie came out, we got 2 separate Dracula movies that both came out and both referenced this in it. You know, both like, you know, the Last Voyage of Demeter is clearly the Dracula version of Dracula is very clearly influenced by the Max Schreck in this, which, by the way, yes, Schreck is named after Max Schreck, the actor who played Dracula in this movie, as is the Christopher Walken villain from Batman Returns, also named Max Schreck. But then you also get in Renfield, you get there's a sequence at the beginning that is very much taken out of these kind of, you know, this and then the later Dracula film, the Universal Monster one that makes reference to it.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say, and then of course, I think we were supposed to get Robert Eggers' Nosferatu this year. I'm not sure when that's coming out. I haven't heard any updated news on that, but that's definitely been in the works for a while. So yeah. Good pick. Good pick. So that is our top 5 most influential horror movies of all time. Write in if you agree or disagree. Can I say something? podcast@gmail.com. Going to go over some of our honorable mentions very quickly. So number 6 for me was Saw. Just kicked off that, horror porn, gore porn, torture porn sort of era of the early to mid 2000s. That, along with the French extremism movement, definitely you can look at that period of time and definitely pick out when those movies came out, just based on just how gross they were and the amount of gore and the amount of just suffering and torture in a lot of those movies from that year, from that era. My number 7 is Alien, which again goes into that sort of Jaws, what do you call it? Categorization of like it's a creature feature, it's a thriller, it's a science fiction thriller. But it has a lot of horror elements in it, obviously, you know, her being, the whole crew being chased by it, the explosion of violence at the beginning with the thing coming out of his stomach, just so many, again, the minimalism of that movie, the slow build, getting to know these people, how much they're showing. I think, really Scott, along with like David Fincher, are 2 guys that are just very exacting. They're very precise about what they want. They know what they want, and, they aren't afraid to do a bunch of takes to get it. So that's just one of the movies that we said at the beginning of it holds up because of that, because of his tenacity to get the shot just exactly the way he wanted it. I think that leads to a lot of the stuff we saw later of just wet horror movies, things being wet, things getting gross. That was definitely one of the first ones, so definitely belonged there. What are some of your honorable mentions?
Yeah, so I mean, I already mentioned Scream and Halloween were both honorable mentions for me. I would say Alien, going off years, was an honorable mention for me too. But yeah, I don't have them ranked necessarily, but I have a whole list of movies that I was considering putting in, including Peeping Tom, which we also mentioned. I think that is a massively influential movie. The Exorcist, of course, super influential. And then Peeping Tom's kind of cousin that came out in the same year, Psycho. I alluded to the Dracula, the Universal Dracula, but I had to go with Nosferatu instead. But Dracula's also massively influential. Of course, I also forgot to mention Night of the Living Dead. Which is was on your list. I think that one definitely deserves a mention at least. And then one that I saw for the first time recently that I will be covering for my Halloween episode that was given to me by my friend Matt from the Matt and Mark Movie Show, and that's Burnt Offerings, which feels like watching that movie that Poltergeist and The Shining and a lot of those movies really were ripping off of this much less known movie made by a guy who mostly did TV movie or TV and TV movies stuff. So Burnt Offerings, kind of a hidden gem.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. One thing we have to mention is A24 and sort of this, people say like, have this problem where people look at a thing and be like, that's new. That's different. And elevated horror, art house horror, avant-garde horror, whatever you want to call it, not new. Not new at all. I have this list pulled up of just art horror films from the 20th century. You could pick anything. Eraserhead, Don't Look Now, just Suspiria, things like that. Possession, Videodrome, just many movies have that like slow moving, slow burn horror is not new at all. But then of course you move into the 21st century. You have things like, even Pan's Labyrinth you could put in there. Funny Games you could put in there. Let the Right One In is definitely what you would call elevated horror. But, I just have this peccadillo, or I have this, annoyance of people looking at a thing and be like, that's new. That's never happened. We have to talk about this and why this now? Why true crime now? Why elevated horror now? And it's just like, it's a long tradition of movies delving into, they're having blood and violence and things like that, but with a sort of avant-garde tinge to it,
Yeah, I completely agree. Everything new is as old as new again.
Exactly. I do have to mention Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If we're talking about influential movies that started out, in the 70s or 80s, that's hugely influential. Obviously, Roger Corman and all his movies sort of influential in the way that movies got made, movies got financed. So many people that he is a guy that helped get so many very large directors, very, very influential directors. I think Scorsese just talked about recently at he had a interview with Edgar Wright at BF5 just recently. They talked about working with Roger Corman, using a bunch of his guys for some of his first projects. So in terms of horror, incredibly influential, but also a sort of what'd you call that? Not a breeding house, but like a minor leagues place where you worked for him, and then many directors would go on to infamy working under Corman. So have to mention his name. And then I said the Ring and Psycho are at the bottom of my list, but you already mentioned them, so there they are. So anything else you want to mention before we move on?
No, I think that about covers it. Those were, we could talk about the entire history of this genre that has, as we mentioned, goes back to the 1890s, as I mentioned on my list. But so I think we got to cut off at some point.
Yeah. So moving on, we got Letterboxd assignments. Bum. I watched my Letterboxd assignment because it was for my challenge. It was for the Hooptober challenge. It was a nice crossover there. Fire in the Sky. Let me pull it up. I'm not a professional, so I don't have it pulled up right now. Have you seen this movie, Derick?
I have not.
Okay. This is a movie from 1993, directed by Robert Lieberman, starring D.B. Sweeney, Robert Patrick, Craig Sheffer, Peter Berg, and James Garner. So a lot of big time names in this movie. The thing I heard about this movie was an extended sequence, a 12-minute sequence in which they depict what a person said happened to them when they were abducted by an alien. This is based on, not a true story, but stories that were told by people. People said that these things happened to them, and it is punctuated by a very long sequence in which a man is, poked and prodded and has things. The biggest thing that got me was, I think people talk about things that really make them squirm and really upset them is fingernails and eyes. And eyes get to me. You do things to people's eyes, and that's gonna fuck me up. And they do a lot of things to this person's eyes and ears and places, and really, really upsetting. So just be on the lookout for that if you want to watch. The rest of it plays out as like not a procedural, but very much like, you guys are the James Garner plays the sheriff or whatever of the town, and he's like, what happened? You guys got drunk. This guy went missing. We have to find his body. The FBI's here. We have to tell them something other than he was fucking abducted. That's not real. And they're like, no, it really happened. Very, very, actually a very good movie. One of the best ones I've seen so far for the challenge, for this year, for the Letterboxd assignments. So highly recommend checking that out.
Very nice, very nice.
Yes. Did you watch Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, your assignment from last time?
I feel like there's a rule that only one of us every week can follow through.
Right.
I kind of forgot about this one until the last couple nights, and I was staying with my brother, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to watch this movie?" It's and he's like, "Maybe," and then I was like, "It is in Korean," and he's like, "Nope." So unfortunately, because I did not get a chance to watch this, I do still plan on watching it. Hopefully, this before we record next. So I will. Definitely watch this one soon.
All right.
Hopefully talk about it on the next show.
Yes. I've added a bunch of stuff to my watch list, so I'll be very interested to see what I get. I'm going to go to my watch list for assignment this week. Going to go to stream, available to stream my watch list, and I'm going to sort by shuffle. And we'll see what we get. We get the Yads, the fucking Yads, the movie from 2000, directed by James Gray. One of his first movies with Mark Wahlberg, Joaquin Phoenix, Charlize Theron, James Caan. Synopsis is, in the rail yards of Queens, contractors repair and rebuild the city's subway cars. These contractors are so lucrative, so graft and corruption are rife. When Leo Handler gets out of prison, he finds his aunt married to Frank Alkin, one of the biggest contractors. He's battling with a minority-owned firm for contracts. All right. Very interesting sounding. I think I put this on because I was like, I got to see more James Gray, which, maybe I don't. Maybe I'll watch Judgment at Nuremberg, because that was the second one that came up there. So maybe I'll check that one out.
That's not exactly a light watch.
No, it's not. So Derick, go to your watch list, sort by streamable.
I'm already there. Oh, okay. Is this a show? I might have to shuffle this. Is The Jewel Thief?
Not sure.
No, it's a movie. It's it's a documentary. Okay, David Chen talked about how this is one of his favorite movies of the year, and how they actually finally made the movie from being John Malkovich in real life. The Jewel Thief. It's a documentary on Hulu about a jewel thief, as the name would imply.
Yeah, it's on Hulu.
Check this out.
That's on Hulu for you. Yeah. So for next time, I thought that Killers of the Flower Moon was coming out this week. Apparently, it's coming out next week. So next show, we'll be talking about Killers of the Flower Moon, possibly Five Nights at Freddy's. If that's something that turns out to be halfway decent, I might
probably see it.
Yeah. Well, did you play the game or no?
Nope.
No. Okay.
No.
You're just a big Hutchinson fan. I've always said this about you, that you're a big Hutchinson head. PETA. Every time they said PETA, I always heard it in Lois's voice. PETA.
Well, when you earlier, I just heard your accent come out for the first time when you said something about a car, and I was like, "What was that?"
No, well, I was putting on the accent because it takes place in Queens, in the rail yards of Queens. Contractors repair and rebuild the city subway cars. Yeah, no, I don't. They
don't have a Boston accent in Queens. I don't think.
Well, that's close enough. Also, be checking out the rest of Fall of the House of Usher. Should have that completed by the next time we talk. More lessons in chemistry, and obviously more Loki talk for next time. So come back next time for all of that. Let's do some plugs now. Doing the Medium blog, I'll be doing some of that end of the year. Coming to the end of the year, so I'll be doing some of the best of the year blogging there. Film essays on YouTube. Also hit 100 followers, so thank you all for that. Hey. It was much easier than I thought. Apparently, Derick, when you put yourself out there, when you go to Letterboxd Discord and you just go to put your name in there and you just follow a bunch of people.
Reddit or Discord?
Both. I went to both the Reddit Letterboxd on there, and I went to the Letterboxd Discord, which is fairly active. So I did both of those things, which got me over the hump of 100 followers. I have 125 right now. So now we're calling it 75 away from 200. So let's shoot for 200 now. Yes, thank you. Go to Spotify for podcasts. Just make a podcast. Go to all my interviews with Cinema Tech, B.R. Yeager, all those guys, and listen back on the stuff me and Deanne did earlier in the year, breaking down Succession Season 4 and The Bear Season 2. Derick, what do you got to plug?
So I have recently launched a new Patreon for my podcast, Underrated. And through that Patreon, I am releasing a exclusive podcast only for patrons. And the first episode actually launched today as of recording, so it would have been out yesterday when you're listening to it. And that is the Patreon show is called Underdogs. And every month, once a month on the 15th, I cover a sports movie. And the first one that I did was Moneyball. So if you'd like to go and listen to that, It is available. The first episode is available to all levels of my Patreon. So there is a $1, $3, and $5 option, all with their different perks. And typically the $3 option is going to be the one that lets you hear the podcast, but I decided to open it up to everybody. So if you want to donate just $1 a month over on the Patreon, Underrated Movie Pod, patreon.com/underrated movie podcast, that is available. Also, my main feed podcast, Underrated, just had a new episode out today. I covered Deadstream, the found footage movie from last year that was on Shudder, with Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast. Had a lot of fun talking about that with him.
Nice. Very cool. Very busy. Two guys, yes. very busy. Even though we have full-time jobs, we're still find time to do all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah. But it's fun. We love doing it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
You love to do it.
You love to do it. Yep. So with that, I have been Damian.
I've been Derick.
And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.